All right, so you want me to talk about the weapon from Kazuha's story quest. Now, the name of this weapon, I'm not even going to try and say. I tried a couple times beforehand and I just couldn't do it. So we're just going to call it the Cursed Blade, right? Because that's what it is in the story quest. This weapon does have a different passive than it did in the story quest. So we're going to talk about the passive that it has after the story quest, right? Because you can't use the one in the story quest once you finished it. So this weapon does get up attack percent, which can be good. Its passive is when a normal charge or plunging attack hits an opponent, it will whip up a hewing gale, dealing AoE damage equal to 180% of attack, and increases attack by 15% for 8 seconds. This effect can take place every 8 seconds, meaning it has permanent uptime. As soon as it goes down, the next normal charge or plunging attack will just make its passive go back up again. So we're going to show what it looks like whenever the passive takes effect, and then we're going to talk about some characters that it can be good on. So before we activate the passive, Benny's attack is going to be 869. Whenever we activate the passive, we'll open it up again and look at his new attack. So if we go up to enemies and we do a normal charge or plunging attack like it says, you will see this red gale that goes around. If we open Benny's menu back up, we will see that his attack is now 914. That is the passive raising the attack. So I do not personally use this weapon, so it's only level 20. The reason I do not use this weapon will become clear later in the video, but I did want to show a couple of things. As you can see, the arrows around Benny that are showing the buff, as soon as they go away, the next normal or charge attack will get the buff back. This weapon and its passive still works, even when it's infused with elements. So with his burst, I am getting pyro damage. Even on the normal attacks with the pyro damage, it still does activate the passive. Now, one thing that you will notice is that even with the infusion of pyro into his normal attacks, the 180% damage that it does from that gale will be still considered physical damage. You notice it is a white number, not a red number. So now we're going to talk about some characters that can make good use of this weapon and why I do not have this weapon leveled up. First, we are going to look at Kaya. Now, Kaya can make use of this weapon, especially if you were using him for like melt, for a forward melt, if Kaya is the one on the field triggering the melt. Now, while Kaya can make better use of a weapon with like energy recharge, you can use this weapon on him. Now, if you are far enough in the story where you have this weapon, there will or should be better options for Kaya, or you should have better options for Kaya at this point, but it can work with somebody like Kaya. So the next character is going to be Kaching, and Certs and V. If you put in the comments I don't have Kaching, I will throw both of you. So characters like Kaching that use their normal and charge attacks for a good chunk of their damage can very much make use of this weapon because of its passive. And as we showed earlier, even when you infuse elements into it, it still works. So Kaching, with her skill getting electro infusion, can still make good use of this weapon. Now, you can use like 3-star Harbinger of Dawn with Kaching, but if you are not running a shielder or a very good healer, it is very difficult to keep up Harbinger of Dawn's passive, in which case this weapon could be better if you are not able to keep your Kaching healthy or shielded. Next is going to be Kamisato Ayaka. Again, this is another character that can infuse their normal and their charge attacks with their element. In this case, it is Cryo. They can make good use of this passive. All of the characters that I do say in this video do like having their attack raised, and this is another good example of if you do not have a good shielder or healer to keep the passive of Harbinger of Dawn up, then this can be a good weapon to use instead, where it's going to be more consistent because you cannot keep the character wielding this healthy or shielded. Now, Ayaka, just like Kaching, will infuse her normal or charge attacks with her element, so she is going to be using a lot of them. She is going to be doing a good chunk of damage with them, meaning that the passive of this weapon is going to stay up all the time. Next is going to be her older brother, Kamisato Ayato. Now, this is again another character that infuses their element into their normal and charged attacks. Ayako does it with his skill, and because you use his normal and charged attacks once you've used his skill, then you can keep this passive always active, getting more attack. Again, I'm going to say this on like every single character. Harbinger of Dawn could replace this as like a beginner friendly or free to play would be a better word there option. But if you don't have a good shielder or healer, it can be very difficult to keep the Harbinger of Dawn passive up. This weapon can replace it to get more consistent damage out of it. Also, having the red, the like super deep red on characters like Ayato and Ayaka kind of actually look good to me, having that really, really hard contrast. Next is going to be Alhaitham, and if you want to make him Christmas colors, you can give him this weapon. He does infuse his normal and charge attacks with Dendro, so this is another character that infuses their elements into their normal and charge attacks, meaning that you're going to be using them a lot, keeping this passive up all the time. Again, Harbinger of Dawn, blah, blah, blah. I've said it 3 times now. I'm not going to say it again. Alhaitham will be Christmas themed if you give him this weapon with the red and the green, but I don't think that that necessarily looks bad. I think it's kind of cool. And now I want to talk about Kazuha. Because it comes from Kazuha's story quest, you might think like, man, this would be an amazing weapon for Kazuha because it's from Kazuha's story quest. It's really not. Kazuha can use it kind of, but there's so many other better weapons, especially if you want his best like free-to-play option, that's going to be Iron Sting, not the Cursed Sword. Even though it does kind of match his aesthetic with the red color on it, and it comes from his story quest, it is not a good weapon for Kazuha. You would have to have Kazuha on the field a lot, and that's really not what Kazuha is best at. Kazuha is best at grouping, getting up his burst, and then swapping to another character to do a lot of damage. Kazuha himself would not be taking full advantage of this weapon, so I do not recommend using it on the person whose story quest it actually comes from. That is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or someone else will be sure to answer, and I will see you in the next one.